Welcome to Talking Buffalo, featuring conversations with guests from around the world of sports, media, pop culture, and all things Buffalo. With your host, Patrick Moran.
Hey, what is going on, everybody? How you doing? Welcome to another episode of Talking Buffalo, your weekday daily driver for Buffalo sports talk and more. Today's episode is presented by Golf Dojo, your space, your time, your game. Bring your game to Golf Dojo, Western New York's best indoor golf experience. Visit mygolfdojo.com. My name is Patrick Moran. Big thank you to everyone out there, as always, for watching, for listening, for following, for subscribing. I do appreciate you all very, very much. This is our weekly Podbag episode. This is the episode where you control the narrative, your questions, your comments, your takes that were submitted, that were sent in, going to be featured on today's show. And this is going to be in all Buffalo Bills Podbag. So no Sabres talk, no life, no pop culture talk, just all straight up Buffalo Bills. And for good reason. The offseason is finally officially over. Training camp is started. Most of you will be seeing this on Wednesday, so training camp is started today. So a lot of good Bills stuff that we're going to get to on today's show. Real quick, though, before I get into that, just one quick thing here. So last weekend, as many of you know, Del Reed in 26 shirts put on the first ever Mafia Con. I had Tim Graham on. Talked about it a little bit. Hopefully you caught Monday's show, my interview with Tim Graham. It was a lot of fun to do. Hit on it a little bit, but just so I don't forget, I want to make sure that I'm really clear on this. I want to give major props to not only Del Reed, but the entire staff at 26 Shirts. What an outstanding job they did putting this on for the first time. Organizing something as big as Mafia Con is hard, I would only imagine, a lot of work. And I'll tell you what, this crew, they pulled it off very well, man. It was well run. It was a lot of fun. The things that they did great, I'm sure they're going to build on for the future. And some things that need to be tweaked a little bit, I'm sure they will figure out and make this even bigger and better going forward. But again, for its first time doing it, its first year, this really was outstanding. There was a lot of fun things to do there. You know, a lot of merch tents. Buffalo Bills players were there to sign autographs, and money was raised for charity with that. A series of podcasts were there. It was just a food trucks, some beer, just a really good time. So I just want to make sure that I give the props to Del and his crew that they so richly deserve. And also, of course, Tim Graham, who quite literally met me at Mafia Con on Saturday afternoon, 85 degrees out, and quite literally zero sleep. He spent 14 consecutive hours on deadline finishing a feature story, a deep dive on Terrell Bernard, which, by the way, that story is now out on The Athletic. So if you have not read that yet, make sure you do. What an outstanding deep dive and delve into the origins of Terrell Bernard. A great read from Tim. But again, a very tired but game Tim Graham. He showed up, no sleep, and I thought he was, as always, outstanding. So big thank you to him as well. A lot of fun. And I'm already looking forward to the 2025 version of Mafia Con. I'm sure it'll be bigger and better than it even was this year. As for the Buffalo Bills, again, the offseason is over. This was, in my opinion, I don't know, it felt to me anyway, I don't know how you guys feel, but just a long-ass offseason. That's what it felt like to me. It feels like visions of A.J. Klein trying to guard Travis Kelce, that feels like 5 years ago. That's how long it feels like this offseason has been for me when it comes to the Buffalo Bills. This was an offseason of change and an offseason that was a little bit different than the last 2 or 3, hell, maybe even 4 off seasons for the Buffalo Bills, because it feels like on paper, Brandon Beane has continued to call this a transitional year. And we'll wait and see if he's right or not. Not rebuilding, transitional. But on paper, at least anyway, you can't take away from the fact that the Bills lost a lot, again, on paper, this offseason. A lot of change. Gone is Jordan Poyer. Gone is Mitch Morse. Gone is Stephon Diggs. Gone is Gabe Davis. Gone is Leonard Floyd. Did I say Mitch Morse? I can't remember. If I didn't, he's gone too. Gone, at least for now, very likely for good, Micah Hyde. Of course, Trey White as well. So this was a big offseason of change, personnel change, leadership change is ongoing now. Maybe culture change is ongoing right now. Add Ryan Bates to that list as well of players gone. It's just, there's a lot of change. And it feels to me, again, going back to the day where Trey White and Mitch Morse got cut on the same day, it feels like an eternity ago. But here we are, third week in July, and Bills training camp is finally here. And I feel like this is a team that's going to have a lot to prove, first and foremost, to themselves. They still very much consider themselves a Super Bowl contender, as they should. I mean, you got one of the best players in football, greatest quarterbacks on the face of this earth, still in his prime, still very healthy, leading this team, very much a Super Bowl contender. But they got a lot to prove to themselves. They got a lot to prove to the doubters out there. There are a lot of people right now who think the Buffalo Bills are in for, I don't want to necessarily say a bad year, but probably a season where they're not considered by most as a top Super Bowl contender. So there's going to be a lot to prove for them on that front. And it's going to be interesting. It's going to be different, and it's going to be a lot of fun. I'm really excited about, I'm excited about every Buffalo Bills season, of course, but this one maybe a little bit more so because I feel like there's more uncertainty with this team right now than there's been in the last handful of years. And so we're clear, though, uncertainty doesn't mean that you automatically think they're going to be worse. I have, and I will continue to make a case that this team might ultimately be, with the changes that they've made, better than they've ever been. You can make a case that some of that great talent in leadership, that core that they got rid of this offseason, given their age and where those guys are at their point of their careers now, you can make a case that this could be a team that could be better than it's been at any point. And this is not part of the mailbag, but I'll just say this real quick. Stephon Diggs, perfect example. You look at Stephon Diggs, 4 years with the Buffalo Bills, I'm going to say the four, literally all 4 seasons, the most prolific receiving seasons in the history of this franchise. You cannot take that away. But your boy's 30 years old. His play seemed to be in decline last year, and a lot of smart people, Tim Graham talked about it on his interview with me on Monday. He had Bill Barnwell on his show. Bill Barnwell, a very respected analytics guy, who was talking about Stephon Diggs just slowing down, his ability to get open, things like that. So, you know what? You're not getting 2020, 2021 Stephon Diggs at this point, probably. So it's going to be fun to watch. And I think that's going to make training camp a lot more interesting too. Who starts to emerge? Do you see signs of guys be more vocal, becoming more of leaders? Who's going to take on that leadership core with that void that has been left? So there's a lot of interesting things to dive into and to look out for starting today with training camp. On that note, I want to get into today's pod bag again. These are all Bills takes, Bills comments and questions today. And as always, if you want to have your question, your take, your comment featured on this weekly pod bag episode, it's pretty simple. You can go to any video that we drop on the Talking Buffalo YouTube channel. Just leave a comment there if it's a good one. If I think it's a good one anyway, I'll plug it. You can tweet at me at Patrick Moran TB, and I'll plug some of those. Or you can email me at talkingbuffalopodcast@gmail.com. On that note, let's dive into the first one here. And I got about 10 or 11 of these to get to today. At Maysworth19 says, not counting Josh Allen, what Bills player are you most excited about for training camp and the regular season? It's a good question. Thank you for that. All right. So, there's obvious candidates like the rookies, the top rookies. I'm very excited about seeing what Keon Coleman is going to bring to this team. I'm very excited about the second round pick, what Cole Bishop is going to bring to this organization. So they're up there. I would say, let me give you my runner-up first. My runner-up for a player that I'm most excited to see at camp and also the regular season, of course, as well. I'm going to go with Khalil Shakir. I think Khalil Shakir is in line to really have that bust-out campaign. I know you're not asking me who's going to be the biggest breakout player on this team, but if you were, I would offer up the name Khalil Shakir. I really liked what I saw from him last year when he took on a bigger role with this football team. And the way I liken him right now is I could see him being a guy who's like a Cole Beasley, but a Cole Beasley type. And I'm talking about Cole Beasley in terms of the hands, the precision slot running that he does, but also a guy who can make you miss and he could take it to the house for a 70-yard touchdown. Kind of shades, not the speed, but I kind of get like little Tank Dell vibes, a little bit anyway, when it comes to Khalil Shakir. I'm not sure that anyone on this team is going to have 1,000 yards receiving, but if I had to pick somebody and somebody was going to do it, I think the popular consensus might be Dalton Kincaid, but not for me. For me, I would go with Khalil Shakir. I think he's in line to have a big season, and I'm very excited to watch him play this year. But my answer is not him. My answer is this. It's Terrell Bernard. I'm going to go with Terrell Bernard. Everybody thinks this guy has Pro Bowl qualities, maybe hell, even like all-pro ability. We saw a huge glimpse of it last year. I 100% believe in my homer heart here, being a little bit of homer, that last year, if Terrell Bernard does not hurt his ankle in the wild card round against Pittsburgh, I truly, honestly believe that the Bills beat the Chiefs in the playoffs in Orchard Park. I truly believe that. I think he makes a play or two that makes a difference in the game. Middle linebacker was a wart. It was a glowing liability against Pat Mahomes, Travis Kelce, and the Kansas City Chiefs. That doesn't happen if Terrell Bernard is out there. He's a splash play guy. He's a difference maker. And I feel like if he's on that field, he's going to make at least one play throughout that game. And it just felt like a defense that was screaming for somebody to make a play. And other than Jordan Poyer knocking the ball loose at the half-yard line, I don't think the Bills defense really made a meaningful defensive play that entire game. And I feel like Terrell Bernard does that. I love Terrell Bernard, which is so funny. I've talked about this with Tim. I've talked about this many times on this show. I don't think I've ever, and I've been wrong a hell of a lot, but I don't think I've ever been more wrong on a player than I was about Terrell Bernard roughly this time 11, 12 months ago. Did not think this guy was a starter. I thought it was laughable that he went to camp, and in my opinion, at least, apparently I was dead wrong, but had a training camp last year, didn't play in the preseason because he got hurt, and still was the week one starter. I'm like, what are we doing here? What is Brandon Beane doing? What is Sean McDermott doing? And from week one through the entire season, he proved that people like me and people, if you had the same line of thinking that I did a year ago, people like you were idiots because he was outstanding. The one concern I have about him is his size and him getting hurt. Can he play 17 weeks at a high level plus the playoffs and stay healthy? That remains to be seen. But tell you what, I was higher on Tremaine Edmonds when he was here than most. I thought Tremaine Edmonds did a lot of things that don't show up in the stat sheets, and I thought he did them well. So for that reason, I thought he was a little bit underappreciated. But so does Terrell Bernard. And the difference is Terrell Bernard does a lot of things that do show up in the stat sheets. He gets sacks. He intercepts the ball. He forces fumbles. He recovers fumbles, tackles for loss. He's a great player. He's fun. And and he's a good story too. By the way, again, read Tim Graham's deep dive on him. Great person, great story. And I am super excited about watching him play. So if you don't say Josh Allen again, the player I'm most excited about seeing this year, most definitely for me, is going to be Terrell Bernard. All right, let's get to another one here. At Joe Goho says, Kansas City traded ahead of Brandon Beane to select all-pro corner Trent McDuffie. The Bills reach for Elam. The Bills handed Kansas City all-pro center and Creed Humphrey while Beane drafted Boogie Basham. So while we trust Brandon Beane and he's built a consistent roster, it's fair to watch and wonder if Xavier Worthy, Keon Coleman, that trade works out. I'm rooting for Beane. Thank you very much for that, Joe. Look, that's fair. We're going to be watching Xavier Worthy real closely, regardless of how Keon Coleman plays. But I would also surmise this, too. When you're comparing those two, I think it's fair that you add Dwayne Carter into that equation. The Bills traded down from 28 because Brandon Beane, he traded down from 28 because there was no receiver that he couldn't live without at 28. But also, Brandon Beane really wanted that third-round pick. He didn't have one, and he wanted it. So that's part of the reason why they moved down. So it's not just, one-on-one if you want to look at it that way. It's unfair. But if you want to look at Worthy versus Coleman, you got to add Dwayne Carter into that equation. I'll say this, though. The Buffalo Bills have helped the Kansas City Chiefs a lot through the years. The Creed Humphrey instead of Boogie Basham, that's a great point. Obviously, the Bills helped the Kansas City Chiefs get Pat Mahomes. Not here to revisit that trade. I'm just saying, and that wasn't even Brandon Beane, by the way, but I'm just saying the Bills have helped the Kansas City Chiefs plenty through the years. But anyway, to get back to your point, yeah, sure. It's fair. Brandon Beane should be watched closely. But, you have 31 other general managers around the league where they make draft picks or personnel decisions that, leave plenty of second guessing. Can't anticipate McDuffie, Kansas City leaping the Bills to get McDuffie. I'll say this too about McDuffie. This is a fair point. McDuffie's become one of the best slot corners in the NFL. He's great. But had Kansas City not leaped him, did the Bills take him? At least if he's playing a slot, what would he be on the Buffalo Bills? Because let's not forget, the Buffalo Bills have one of the best slot corners on earth in Taron Johnson. So I'm not quite sure how that would have worked out. Yeah, look, Kaiir Elam, there's no getting around it. Right now, he looks like through 2 years at least, first round pick, considering it's been a bust. Boogie Basham was a really bad miss in the second round. No denying it. Cody Ford, not a great pick either in the second round. But again, you could second guess any general manager right now. And let's not forget about Terrell Bernard. Let's not forget about Spencer Brown. Those are picks that Brandon Beane nailed on day 2, both in the third round. Or if you want to go beyond that, Gabe Davis, Taron Johnson, who we just mentioned, day 3 picks. I mean, the Bills Brandon Beane has been pretty damn good with the draft when you think about it. He's had some early misses, and that definitely is a little bit of a stain, and deservedly so too. But he's also made some really good picks. I'll tell you though, your take, and this is getting away from the whole Worthy Coleman thing, but man, that Creed Humphrey pick. God, if the Bills could have had him and not Boogie Basham, how different this offensive line probably would look. Look, Xavier Worthy is probably going to be a good player. Doesn't mean that the Bills made a bad decision. But here's the one thing I will say. In the past, before like pre-Josh Allen, you could say, like when Sammy Watkins, perfect example. I know he was a high pick that the Bills traded all the way up to 5 for. But when you look at Sammy Watkins, it's like, all right, you make a big move, you take a receiver that high, and it doesn't work out. But you could say Bills quarterbacking sucked during that time. So maybe no receiver would have been good with Manuel or whoever was the quarterbacks during that time, during that era. You got Josh Allen, so you can't use the comparison. Well, Xavier Worthy's great because he gets to play with Pat Mahomes. Well, Xavier Worthy would have got to play with Josh Allen, who's pretty damn great himself, if that makes sense. But I expect Xavier Worthy to be a good player. But I also expect Keon Coleman to be a pretty good player as well. And again, you get Dwayne Carter. You cannot do this comparison and not mention Dwayne Carter as well. Anyway, real quick break, come back. Going to fly through some more of these. Got some really good ones coming up after this break. All right, we are back here going over your comments, your questions, your takes. This week's Podbag and all Buffalo Bills edition. Training camp is now underway. At Shankula 11B says, I don't feel Joe Brady has ever proven anything at the NFL level, and we are giving him too much praise and expectation. We forget we should have lost to the Pats again. He's talking about near the end of last season. The Chargers and the Miami Dolphins in Week 18 with Joe Brady. All right. Thanks for that, Sean. Look, that's fair. I think last year's offense was still trying to find more of an identity. I think the decline in Stephon Diggs certainly played a role in that. Some of that is on Stephon maybe himself. Some of that is certainly on the offense and the philosophy, what they were trying to do mid-season, which kind of leads to my point here. I think that it is a tough task going from being the quarterback coach to becoming offensive coordinator, like mid-season, literally on the fly, like Joe Brady did. I'm sure that's not easy. Again, I'll say that, I've said this before, the Bills offense was somewhat inconsistent, but how many offenses around the league really are completely consistent? Don't say the Chiefs, because that offense borderline sucked last year during the regular season, and they won the Super Bowl. Maybe the 49ers offense was consistently good. Detroit to an extent. Not many teams. So anyway, maybe you're seeing, which is the other point I was thinking about. I'm like, I really haven't seen a lot of overt praise and expectation. If anything, I see more people predicting that the Bills offense is going to just run the ball more and quite likely take a step back. So maybe you're seeing and reading more praise and an expectation on Joe Brady than I am. I'm not feeling like, many people are out there right now anointing Joe Brady the next Brian Dable or the next like offensive coordinator mastermind. But that said, I do have a solid level of confidence with Joe Brady. Again, I think there's a big difference between becoming OC on the fly in mid-season as opposed to having an entire offseason to put your vision into place, your signature, your print, your stamp on this offense, what you envision it looking like, getting some of the personnel that you want as opposed to taking over a team in week 10 of the regular season. Now, I'm sure Caponomics played the biggest role. Maybe, offensive coordinator Aaron Kromer might have had a bigger role, but you look at center and they get rid of Mitch Morse and they move a bigger Connor McGovern to center. And that might be a vision that Joe Brady had. Maybe Joe Brady's vision was to be the one. Maybe he's more behind getting rid of Stephon Diggs than we think about. Maybe it's not just money. Maybe it's not just locker room bullshit. Maybe it's not just Brandon Beane decided this team's better off without him. Maybe Joe Brady had plenty to do with that. Maybe Joe Brady wants an offense that he considers less predictable. Now they got more options. They don't have that alpha in the room. Well, certainly not now. Maybe Keon Coleman ultimately will become that guy, but he's not now. So maybe maybe Joe Brady prefers to have this kind of offense, a guy where who the hell knows who's going to lead the team in catches or yards this week. Or, hell, even at running back, who the hell knows if James Cook's going to carry the ball 18 times or Ray Davis might have 15 carries that game. So I'm with you in terms of if you're giving too much expectation and praise with Joe Brady, maybe to pump the brakes. But that said, again, I don't know a hell of a lot of people that are actually doing that. And I do have a level of confidence in Joe Brady. Yeah, they struggled some against certain teams last year, but the offense also looked pretty good at times. And I love the fact that he's had an entire offseason now to really implement what he wants to do with this team. Etsy Park in 2009 says, I want the Bills' breakout guy this year to be Justin Shorter on offense, but I don't think that happens. Defensively, the team needs Rizzo to be that guy and have a breakout year and be a true disturbance on defense. All right, thanks for that, C. Parkin. Look, yeah, I'm with you there, man. I think Justin Shorter has an attainable but tough road to even make this team right now. He's going to have competition. Chase Claypool potentially, KJ Hamler, depending on how he looks and if he's going to return kicks. Hell, maybe Shavers for all we know, and Isabella might be in the mix. But barring injuries, yeah, he's going to have a tough road to even make this football team. And even if he does, barring injuries, I feel like he's going to have a tough time even seeing the field because you got Shakir, you got Curtis Samuel, you got Keon Coleman, you got Matt Collins, who's a solid special teams player. So those four guys are a lock. You probably have MVS making this team too. So if Shorter would even make the team, he'd be that sixth receiver. Is that even enough to be active on game day? I don't know. So yeah, I'm with you there. It'd be nice. It would be real nice to see a fifth round pick kind of blossom. And look, let's be real clear here. Every year, players seem to come out of nowhere. Look at Terrell Bernard last year. Although the difference was Terrell Bernard went into camp locked up with Tyrell Dodson as, who's going to be the starter. So there was kind of a positional battle for a starter, whereas Justin Shorter might be considered a long shot to even make a team. So maybe that's not the greatest comparison, but my point is you never know. Guys kind of emerge out of nowhere almost every year. Maybe it'd be Justin Shorter, certainly like you, though, not going to count on it. As for Greg Rizzo, great candidate. And you don't just want Greg Rizzo to have a quote-unquote breakout season. I feel like at this point you need Groot to make that happen. He's been solid. He's been very solid. He's an all-around really good defensive end, but he's never had more than 8 sacks so far in his first 3 seasons. He hasn't missed a lot of games, but he's been far less than 100%, playing through some injuries. I feel like Greg Rizzo needs to bump it up right now. He needs to find a way to hit double digits in sacks this year. That's what it'll take, I think, right now for this Bills defense to be at its best. Now, if we're being objective, I think it's fair to wonder if Greg Rizzo is one of those guys who has a high floor. Like he's safe. He's not going to stink. He's going to be solid. So that's what I mean by high floor. Is he one of those guys who has a high floor, but maybe he doesn't have that sky-high ceiling? A guy who can get you 15 sacks because he explodes. Not sure that's Groot. Also not sure that's a bad thing. I look at Greg Rizzo and I think this. He could be a much better version than, say, Shaq Lawson. Shaq Lawson, really good against the run, minimal juice at getting to the quarterback. I think Rizzo's definitely better at doing that, but Shaq, just like Shaq, Rizzo's really good against the run, an all-around good player. And like I said, a better version of Shaq Lawson. I'm just not sure that Greg Rousseau is a guy who's going to ever be a guy who gets you, like 11 to 13, 14 stacks. I'm just not sure he's that type of player. But him having that breakout year would certainly be huge for the Buffalo Bills. At Vanilla Isaac says, I think Elam developing to the point where we could put him in and have the true ability to mix and match outside corners based on matchup would just change life as we currently know it. Thanks for that, Vanilla. Look, man, I'm going to be completely honest with you, man. I'm not nearly as high and optimistic about Kaiir Elam as you are. At least when it comes to that, what you said about being a matchup based with outside corners based on the matchup. Not for me, man. Christian Benford and Rasul Douglas, to me, I think they're, as long as they stay healthy, they're locked in as starters. In fact, I would go and say, I think Kaiir Elam, as things stand right now, is more in danger of losing that outside boundary CB3 spot to Ingram at camp, or maybe an outside addition. I think he's closer to being in danger of losing that position, like this year's Dane Jackson, I think, than he is becoming a matchup-based type of starter who could potentially challenge Benford at this point. Now, that said, I'm not out on Kaiir Elam either. I know a lot of people are out on him. I'm not. Bobby Babbage, I get that right. That being defensive coordinator, I think that could help. Very well respected. Sean McDermott works well with defensive backs, of course, as well. But maybe Bobby Babbage being, that's not an easy word to say if you say it fast, by the way, an easy name to say. But anyway, I think him being DC, that could be to Kaiir Elam's benefit. Kind of like a fresh start, a little bit of a clean slate. Elam does have some experience now. Maybe he has more mental confidence. Like I said, going into camp, that certainly could help him. I know he's even changed his number back to number 5, where he played well with. He did not play well in his mind anyway, number 24. So there's lots of factors. I know that sounds silly, but hey, maybe that's something mentally that is lingering in his head that can help. I do think Kaiir Elam goes to camp with a clean slate. I think that's important. I think it's important to say that because, he knows, well, I shouldn't say he knows because you never know, but he's not going in there as a starter. He's going in there to solidify a spot on this roster at this point. Again, I think if you're looking at Kaiir Elam and you're saying, all right, first of all, he's a first-round pick, and if you think he's going to develop into a really good starter at this point, never say never, but you're probably going to be disappointed if that's your expectation. And it's not mine. Right now, I want to see a guy who is a more athletic, younger Levi Wallace or Dane Jackson, a guy when called upon to start, when called upon to make a play, has the ability to go in there and you're not like, oh my God, Rasul Douglas just twisted his ankle. We got to put Kaiir Elam in there. I want to not feel that way if Kaiir Elam is in the game. If he can get to that point, then I'll be happy at this point of his, like I said, his Bills career with having Kaiir Elam. But in terms of expectation, if you're looking for him to be a starter based on matchup, like you said, sorry, buddy, just do not see that happening. All right, a real quick break here to let you know, hey, golf fans, and I know there's plenty of you out there watching and listening right now, want to let you know that whether you're a beginner that's brand new to the sport, trying to truly learn the game, or even if you're a regular fixture on the course, looking to get your game up to that next level by getting lessons, I'm here to tell you right now that the teaching pro you need in your life is definitely Jeff Metis, an award-winning PGA professional. Jeff has been helping golfers of all skill levels get the very most of their ability for nearly 3 decades. Jeff is also a well-known voice of golf off the course as well, as co-host of the Tee to Green Show on WGR 550 alongside Brian Cozio. Lessons with Jeff Metis will drastically change your game for the better. Trust me, I am seeing it right now firsthand. Visit www.mygolfdojo.com to book your lessons with Jeff Metis today. All right, going to get to a couple more of these. At Jason Thomas 1877 says, Keon Coleman looks like a beast already. We'll see. Could be. I'm not going to put a lot of stock into workout videos that are kind of almost like PR clips sent out by agents, his agent, stuff like that. But look, I'm certainly optimistic on Keon Coleman. Real quick, too, by the way, at Mafia Con, I met him briefly. I was hoping to be able to actually get him to jump on the show, but it didn't work out. But I did, I met him briefly, talked to him for maybe 15, 20 seconds. And of course, I'm not going to be able to gauge any kind of informed opinion on a player or person based on a 15 or 20-second exchange. He just seems to me, I mean, I did watch him interact with a lot of fans too. He seems like a genuine person. Like the Keon Coleman you've seen since the Bills had drafted him from the opening press conference through now, none of it feels phony. None of it feels disingenuous. None of it feels like an act. Feels like that's who he really is. Which of course, on the football field doesn't mean a lot. Just about off the field stuff. Look, on the field, I like him. He has definitely grown. And I'm not even talking about as the player. I mean, as a person. I'm talking about as the player. The pick has definitely grown on me through the months. I did not like it at the time, and I'm not going to sit there and say that I was high on Keon Coleman before the draft or that I mocked Keon Coleman to the Bills in any of my mock drafts or even really thought much about him because I thought the Bills are going to be focused on downfield speed, and that's not really what Keon Coleman's strength is, at least not right now. But we are hearing more and more that he's faster, he plays faster than what his 40 time was, and had his 40 time been better, he might not have been available. In fact, he probably wouldn't have been available when the Bills ultimately drafted him. We'll wait. We'll see. He looks like a beast. I'll tell you what, go to 3 or 4 camp practices. I will. And if I see him looking like a beast, I'll be the first to jump on board with that. But I can't call a dude a beast based on what I've seen in OTAs or some clips that I found on Twitter at that point. Couple more here before we get out. Sloth nose ball. I fully expect the Bills to contend for a Super Bowl this season, but if Keon is too raw or the offense just clearly needs another guy, then we could likely trade for a guy mid-season. But for now, if we need to make a big trade for anything, it's defensive end, not wide receiver. Thanks for that, Sloth. You know what? That's an interesting point. Defensive end could happen, especially if Von Miller's cooked, if he's washed up, or ditto for Dwayne Smoot, if he just doesn't have much left after coming off a major injury as well. Especially if something were to happen to Groot or to AJ Epinesa. So could it happen mid-season? Sure. But obviously I wouldn't count on it. I would bet the more likely trade scenario for me right now, maybe not even mid-season, maybe even before the end of training camp is, and not maybe necessarily for a huge name, but I would bet that if Brandon Beane's going to make a trade for a player, Brandon Beane's notorious for trading one of his own players who ultimately probably ends up making the team. He finds a way to trade him to somebody and get a draft pick. I get that. But I'm going the other end now. I'm saying if Brandon Beane acquires a player via trade where he gives up a draft pick, I'd be more willing to wager right now that cornerback would be the position. Because again, you got 2 starters and then you got a lot of question marks right now. Having a guy like Dane Jackson has been a nice safety valve. Like ideally, you don't want Dane Jackson to be your starter, but you know if he's going in there, you could feel some comfort and a sense of confidence. And I don't know that Sean McDermott feels that way about Kaiir Elam. And if he doesn't impress, forget about us stupid fans and content creators and media people. I'm talking about the organization. If he doesn't impress Sean McDermott, if he doesn't impress Bobby Babich, I could easily see Brandon Beane having to go outside the organization, especially if they don't feel high on Ingram being that guy and going and trading for somebody as opposed to waiting for guys to get cut and hoping that the right guy hits the waiver wire. I don't necessarily expect that to happen before the season starts, but I would say that would be the stronger possibility to me. Rusty Shackelford. Dawson Knox will get more red zone looks. I could see him surprising people. I'll tell you what, Rusty, I like where your head's at here, man. I do. I talked about him, Dawson Knox being him, a little bit on the show recently. He stunk last year, also hurt. But let's not forget, he was very good in 2021 and 2022. Like there's a reason he earned, at the time anyway, what now looks like a pretty regretful contract if we're being honest. But I'll tell you what, contract aside, I think he's going to play a pretty significant role with this team. Not every week. Like Dawson Knox is not going to play 50% or more of the snaps every week. I don't think Dawson Knox is going to have 6 catches for 72 yards and maybe, a touchdown every second or third game, all the time. But he'll have some of those games. I could see him making a clutch touchdown catch or a big third down conversion, stuff like that. When you look at this team, we talk about breakout players and stuff like that. If we were talking like sleeper candidates, I think Dawson Knox could be right up there because he's a guy that no one thinks about right now. Everyone's high on Dalton Kincaid, as it should be, or the receivers or running the football more. But Dawson Knox absolutely has the ability to be a weapon in this offense. Again, it's not going to be a consistent every week type of performance from him, but I think he's a guy who's going to help this team at times. And forget the contract because he's not going anywhere. He's not going anywhere this year, and he's almost certainly not going anywhere next year either. So find a way to make him a useful role player and contributor, and I'd be very happy with that. 2 more here. At Chuck Midori 9086. I'd be happy if Javon Solomon turns out to be a special down sack machine. Thanks for that, Chuck. Look, a lot of people for sure. But I think you or anyone else is kind of like living in dreamland right now if you're expecting that as a rookie in 2024. He's a 5th round pick, very raw. I would say this. This is what I would offer you. First and foremost, with Von Miller, the most significance he's going to bring is on the field this year because the Bills need him to be a good player. But a kind of low-key under the radar thing where I think Von Miller is going to have significance with this team is going to be mentoring the pass rushing and nurturing the development to some extent of Javon Solomon. I look at Javon Solomon and I think he's a project guy. He's a guy who might become that guy. Like he might become a sack specialist down the road. It's not unheard of. It's not like 5th round picks never, emerge and become great players in the NFL. But to do it as a rookie, that certainly would be a very, very, very lofty expectation. I would not say that. I would expect him to be almost he's going to make the roster unless he's awful for whatever reason in camp in the preseason. Barring that, he's going to make the roster. But I think for the most part, barring injuries, of course, especially early in the year, it's going to almost be like treat him like a red shirt guy. Like this is going to be a learning year for Javon Solomon. And hell, Von Miller will be gone after this year. Pick his brain. Learn as much from Von Miller on the field anyway as you possibly can. So down the road, I like him. Sack specialist, sure. This year, I don't know. I'm certainly not counting on it at all. Last one here. At Mike Samole says, I, for one, don't get the Houston love. Everyone is crowning CJ Stroud being there as a new elite, but you can't go off one season. He keeps it up this season, then I would be all in. But ascending rookies and first-year guys on a small sample size rarely end well. Oh, thanks for that. I don't know, man, though. I think Houston's the real deal. I really do. Maybe if CJ Stroud didn't have the weapons, I would tend to agree with that a little more. But, man, you're talking Nico Collins and Tank Dell, Stephon Diggs, Dalton Schultz, not to mention Joe Mixon's in the background. I think they just signed Cam Ayers as well. I don't see any reason why you would think that CJ Stroud would regress. And with those weapons he has, even if he does a little bit, I still think they're going to be fine, which, by the way, their defense is good too. And they added Danielle Hunter this offseason. I think personally, I'm the opposite. You sound like you're not too high on Houston. In fact, you said that. I'm the opposite. I think Houston right now is legit. I think the hype is justified. I think they're on the same level right now as Kansas City and Cincinnati, Buffalo. And I'm just being completely honest with you right now. I know how we feel about teams in July don't really mean shit, but that's where I'm at with Houston right now. I'll tell you, to end this here, I think a team that's kind of a little bit on the wild side with hype is actually in the Bills division, and that's the New York Jets. I don't get it. The Jets right now, I saw a FanDuel power ranking. I think the Bills were 12th. Houston was, I think, even 13th. The Jets were 6th. And I'm thinking in my mind, like, what? And again, it don't mean shit. I get it. It's the summer. Who cares? It's still interesting to me. Like, why is the Jets hype train so wild? This is a team that is littered with question marks. And I mean littered with question marks. Are they good? Hell yeah. They got elite players. Sauce Gardner, elite. Garrett Wilson, elite. Breece Hall, well, on the verge of being an elite running back. Great defensive line. Come on, man. They're good. They got a lot of talent. They're great. But they got a lot of question marks too, including a guy who's a 40-year-old, going on 41-year-old quarterback nutcase, it seems at this point, who even knows if he's healthy. And even he didn't play that well before he came to the Jets his last year with Green Bay. Like, what does Aaron Rodgers have left? Is quarterback not important for the New York Jets? They got 2 offensive tackles who are old, still good, but they're old, new team. And now they got Hassan Reddick, who they traded for. They gave up a 3rd-round pick. Training camp starting today, at least as I record this, and he's not reporting to camp. So that looks like that's going to be an issue. New team, not to mention a head coach who knows he's coaching for his job. There's no question. Like Sean McDermott, the Bills could step back this year. Bills can miss the playoffs. Sean McDermott ain't getting fired. If the Jets don't make the playoffs at a minimum, Salah's gone. He's gone. So there's a lot of pressure on that team. There's a lot of questions on that team, including the most important position in sports, arguably. And you want to talk about a hype train? I mean, everyone's picking, not everyone, but a lot of people are picking this team to be one of the best teams in the league. And I don't know, maybe it's just me, but I definitely don't get that hype. But we'll see. Because again, the offseason is finally over. So happy about that. I'm going to be at camp as much as I could possibly get there. I only have tickets right now for 1 practice, but just like last year, I ended up going to 7 or 8 practices. They always come up, and I'm going to take that trip to Rochester as much as I can because I feel like if I'm going to talk about this team every day, it's important to be in front of that field and seeing things happen with my own set of eyes instead of just, going on what other people are talking about and then kind of offering my little spin on that as well. I think it's important to try to be there as much as I can. So when I'm there, I'll definitely have some camp observation episodes with some guest media people who are covering the team as well. But anyway, that's going to do it for this episode. Big thank you as always again for watching, for listening. Follow me on Twitter at Patrick Moran TV. Check out the YouTube channel, Talking Buffalo. Appreciate y'all very much. Be back, brand new episode, maybe even a little bit of training camp stuff here on the show tomorrow.